My name is Cole, and I have carried this story in my chest for 4 years like a stone that never gets lighter. Today I'm putting it down. I need you to understand who Thomas was before I tell you what happened. Because if you don't know who Thomas was, you won't understand the weight of any of this. Thomas Briggs was my older brother's best friend first. He came into my life when I was 14 and he was 17. This tall, loud, ridiculously confident kid from Portland, Oregon who talked too fast and laughed too hard and somehow made everyone around him feel like the most important person in the room. By the time I was 16, he was my best friend too. Not by assignment, by choice. Thomas chose people deliberately. If he liked you, he showed up for you. Fully. No halfway, no conditions. We played baseball together through high school. We drove across 3 states the summer after graduation just because we could. We got our first apartments 2 blocks from each other in Denver. We were at every major moment in each other's lives. Every birthday. Every bad breakup. Every new job. Every stupid mistake that needed a second person to help cover it up. Before anyone found out. When Thomas met Lauren, I was there. First date. He called me after and said, "Cole, I'm going to marry that woman." I told him he was insane. He was right and I was wrong, which honestly was a pattern with us. Lauren was an elementary school art teacher from a small town outside of Denver. She was quiet in the way that meant she was actually listening, which is rarer than people think. She had this ability to make you feel completely calm just by being near her. Thomas, who was loud and restless and always moving, called her his anchor. He meant it as the highest compliment a person like him could give. Their daughter Lily was born when Thomas was 29. She had his eyes, and her mother's calm in this enormous smile that seemed too big for her tiny face. Thomas used to carry her everywhere on his shoulders like she was the queen of a very small kingdom, which she absolutely was. I was Uncle Cole. I took that job very seriously. Now I need to tell you about the night everything changed. It was a Saturday in March. Thomas and I had been at a college basketball game. Downtown, our team won, which put us both in a great mood. And we were walking back to his truck in the parking garage. It was late. Most people had already cleared out. We heard it before we saw it. A scuffle, voices raised. And then we turned a corner and saw 2 men cornering a woman near the stairwell. She was backed against the wall. She was terrified. Thomas didn't pause. He didn't look at me and ask what we should do. He just moved. That was Thomas. He was already running the calculation, while other people were still processing the question. He got between the woman and the men. He told her to run. He told me to call 911. And then things happened very fast and very wrong. One of the men had a knife. I didn't see it until it was too late. Thomas took a blow to the side, a bad one. I tackled the man with the knife. The other man ran. The woman ran. I held pressure on Thomas's side with both hands and talked to him until the ambulance came. And I told him he was going to be fine. And I told him help was coming. And I have never in my life worked so hard to believe something that I could already feel was not true. Thomas died in surgery 2 hours later. Internal bleeding. The surgeon said there was nothing they could have done differently. I have never fully believed that. I don't think I ever will. I sat in that hospital waiting room and called Lauren. That was the hardest phone call of my life. I have no words for what she sounded like. I have no words for what I sounded like. I just remember saying his name over and over. Like if I kept saying it, it would mean something different. Lily was 4 years old. She kept asking when Daddy was coming home. The months after Thomas died were the darkest stretch of my life. And I was just the best friend. I cannot imagine what it was like inside Lauren's world. She went through the motions because Lily needed her to. She fed Lily, dropped her at preschool, picked her up, made dinner, gave baths, read bedtime stories, and then, after Lily was asleep, she would just sit in the quiet of that house and disappear inside herself. I visited every week, sometimes twice. I told myself it was for Lauren and Lily. But if I'm honest, I needed to be there too. Being in that house, around the people who had loved Thomas, was the only place the grief felt like it had somewhere to go. About 7 months after he died, Lauren's situation started getting dangerous. And I don't mean emotionally, I mean practically. Thomas had been the primary income. Lauren's teaching salary covered the basics, but not the mortgage, not the car, not the medical bills that had piled up during those 2 hours in the hospital. She applied for assistance. She cut everything she could cut. She was drowning quietly, the way people do when they're too proud to scream and too exhausted to swim. Then she found out the school district was cutting positions due to budget issues. Her job, gone. Effective at the end of the semester. She didn't tell me for 2 weeks. When she finally did, she said it so flatly, so emptily, like she had already run out of the energy to be shocked by bad news. She just said, "Cole, I don't know how much longer I can keep Lily in this house." That sentence hit me somewhere deep. I went home that night, and I sat with it. I thought about Thomas in that parking garage, moving without hesitation. No calculation, just pure instinct toward the right thing. I thought about what he would do if our positions were reversed. I didn't have to think very hard. Thomas would have already done it. He wouldn't have needed a whole night to figure it out. I called Lauren the next morning. I told her I had a proposal, and I needed her to hear the whole thing before she responded. Then I told her that I wanted her and Lily to move into my place. And I told her that if she was open to it, legally, on paper, I thought we should get married. Not for romance. For stability. For Lily. For health insurance and mortgage. Protection and the practical wall of security that a legal partnership provides that friendship alone cannot. She was quiet for so long, I genuinely thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "Cole, do you understand what you're offering?" I said, "I think Thomas would have done the same thing. Actually, I know he would have. He wouldn't have even waited this long." She cried, and then she said she needed time to think. I told her to take whatever she needed. She called back in 3 days. She said yes. We were honest with our families. We told them exactly what it was, a protective arrangement, a way to give Lily stability, a way to make sure Lauren didn't lose everything Thomas had worked for. My mother thought I had lost my mind. Lauren's sister called it beautiful and heartbreaking in the same sentence. A few of Thomas's relatives went silent in a way that communicated everything without saying anything. We didn't let that stop us. Moving in together was an education. Lauren was organized in a way that bordered on architectural. Every cabinet had a system. Every Sunday had a structure. I was someone who considered finding a clean mug a successful morning. We clashed on approximately 47 small things in the first 2 months. We worked through all of them because we were both adults who understood what we were doing and why. Lily made it easier. She had this way of filling up a space with pure noise and energy that made every awkward silence between two adults completely irrelevant. She would climb on me during breakfast, demand that I read her the same book 4 times in a row, and fall asleep on the couch with her feet on my lap like I had been furniture in her life forever. She started calling me Uncle Cole less and less. She started just calling me Cole. And then one afternoon, completely casually, she called me Dad. Not to get my attention, not as a question, just as a fact, like it had already been decided somewhere inside her, and she was just getting around to announcing it. Lauren heard it from the kitchen. Our eyes met over Lily's head. Neither of us said anything. That was the moment I understood that something had shifted, not just for Lily, but for me. I had walked into this arrangement with clean intentions and clearly defined walls. And somewhere between the 47 small arguments and the Sunday morning pancakes and the bedtime stories read in the hallway dark, the walls had come down without me giving them permission. I didn't say anything to Lauren. I kept it locked down. I told myself I was just deeply attached to Lily, which was true, and that I was confusing that attachment for something else, which was a lie I was willing to maintain for as long as necessary. Then Lauren found out the truth. Not about my feelings. About the night Thomas died. It came out by accident, the way most important truths do. A friend of a friend, who had been at the basketball game, mentioned something to someone who mentioned it to Lauren's sister, that the men in the parking garage hadn't been random, that they had been following someone, that there were details in the police report that Lauren had never been shown because I had specifically asked the detective, in those terrible first hours after surgery, to keep certain things away from her while she was in shock. The detail she found out was this. The woman those men were cornering was someone I knew. A woman I had been briefly seeing who had a complicated, dangerous history I hadn't known about. Those men had followed her because of something in her past. And Thomas had died, not just because he was brave, but because of a situation that had grown from my life. Lauren confronted me on a Tuesday evening after Lily was in bed. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, and she put a piece of paper down between us, something her sister had forwarded. And she said, very quietly, "Tell me what this is." I told her everything. All of it. Every detail I had protected her from. Every choice I had made in those first hours. Every day since then that I had carried the full weight of knowing that Thomas died in a situation that had roots in my world. I did not make excuses. I did not ask for forgiveness. I just told her the truth, and then I sat there and let her feel whatever she needed to feel. She didn't scream. That almost made it worse. She just sat there with tears running down her face and said, "You let me think it was random. You let me believe he just happened to be a hero that night." I said, "He was a hero that night. That part is not different. Nothing about who Thomas was is different." She said, "But it started with you." I said, "Yes, it started with me." She got up and went to bed. She didn't speak to me for 2 days. I slept on the couch and I did not push. I made breakfast every morning and left it on the counter. I took Lily to school. I came home. I waited. On the third day, she came and sat next to me on the couch. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, "I've been asking myself what Thomas would do with this information. And the answer I keep getting is, he would have already forgiven you. Not because it didn't matter. Because he understood that people don't choose the consequences of every thread their life pulls." I couldn't speak. She said, "He saved you. And then you spent the last year and a half trying to save us. I don't think that's guilt. I think that's love. And I think you've been feeling things you haven't told me." I said, "Lauren." She said, "Don't. Just be honest. One more time. Be honest." So I was. I told her that what had started as a promise had become something I hadn't planned and couldn't undo. I told her I understood if that complicated everything. I told her that no matter what she decided, I was not going anywhere. I would sleep on the couch for the next decade if that's what she needed. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "Thomas used to say you were the most loyal person he'd ever met. He said if he ever needed someone to show up for the hard thing, it would be you. Not because you're perfect, because you stay." She reached across and put her hand over mine. She said, "I'm not ready to call this love yet, but I'm not ready to let go either. And I think Thomas sent you. I really do." We did not have a fairy tale moment after that. We had something better, a slow, deliberate, honest rebuilding. We went to grief counseling together. We talked about Thomas constantly, openly, without flinching. We let Lily lead us. Because children have a way of cutting through adult confusion with pure, unfiltered truth. 2 years later, Lauren and I stood in our backyard on a warm evening in September. Just family. Just the people who mattered. Lily, who was now 7 years old, stood between us in a yellow dress. She had specifically requested yellow, and she held both of our hands through the whole ceremony. At the end, she looked up at me and said, very seriously, "Okay, now you're really my dad." I looked at Lauren. Lauren was already crying. I was already gone. Thomas Briggs saved my life in a parking garage in Denver on a March night 4 years ago. He didn't do it so I would feel guilty. He didn't do it so I would spend the rest of my days shrinking under the weight of what happened. He did it because that's who he was. Someone who moved toward the hard thing without hesitation. Because the right thing rarely waits for you to feel ready. I spent a long time believing I owed a debt I could never repay. I don't believe that anymore. I believe I was given a life, his gift, whether he meant it that way or not. And the only right thing to do with a gift like that is to fill it all the way up. Lily calls me dad every single day now. Lauren calls me hers. And every time I sit at that dinner table with those two people, I feel Thomas in the room. Not as a ghost, as a presence. Warm and loud, and completely sure he called it right. He did. He always did.